Ambassador Zektar of the Vraxian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes as he entered the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. The massive hall stretched for kilometers, its crystalline walls reflecting the light from 1,000 different suns. Representatives from over 300 species filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic civilization that had taken millennia to build. Today's session would be historic, though not in the way anyone expected. The human delegation sat in the newer section, added only 50 years ago when Earth had finally achieved faster-than-light travel and qualified for council membership. 3 humans in simple blue uniforms occupied seats that seemed modest compared to the elaborate displays of other species. Ambassador Sarah Chen, a woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, sat perfectly still while her 2 advisors whispered quietly beside her. Zektar felt his gill slits flutter with anticipation. The Vraxian Empire had spent decades building this moment, carefully orchestrating the political pressure that would finally put these aggressive newcomers in their proper place. Council Speaker Limon, a towering crystalline being whose voice resonated through both sound and electromagnetic frequencies, called the session to order. The ambient chatter of hundreds of species fell silent as his words echoed through translation matrices. We gather today to address the continued expansion of the human species into territories claimed by established council members, Limon announced. The Vraxian Empire has brought formal charges of territorial violation, resource theft, and cultural contamination against the Terran Federation. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several species had similar complaints about human activities, though few had been willing to challenge the newcomers directly. Humans had a reputation for being surprisingly effective in conflicts, despite their primitive technology and recent arrival on the galactic stage. Zektar rose gracefully, his 8-foot frame commanding attention as he activated his translation implant. Honored Speaker, esteemed council members, the Vraxian Empire has shown remarkable patience with human expansionism. But patience has its limits. He gestured toward a holographic display that materialized above the chamber's center. Star charts showed human colonies spreading like an infection across previously unclaimed systems, mining operations that stripped entire asteroids, and trade routes that bypassed established council commerce networks. In the past 20 years alone, humans have established 17 unauthorized colonies and systems within our sphere of influence. They have ignored our territorial markers, dismissed our cultural preservation zones, and actively disrupted trade relationships that took centuries to establish. The display shifted to show specific incidents. Human cargo ships refusing to pay traditional passage fees. Human scientists studying archaeological sites without permission from the species that considered them sacred. Human military vessels appearing in systems where they had no business. Most egregious of all, Zektar continued, his voice rising with practiced outrage, they have refused every attempt at civilized negotiation. When we approach them diplomatically, they simply state their position and refuse to compromise. They act as if their brief existence gives them equal standing with species that have navigated the stars for millions of years. Ambassador Chen finally stirred, leaning forward slightly in her chair. Several council members noticed the movement and fell silent, curious to hear the human response. Zektar pressed his advantage. The Vraxian Empire, with the support of 47 council members, demands immediate human withdrawal from all disputed territories. Furthermore, we require formal acknowledgement of established territorial boundaries and payment of reparations for resources already extracted. He paused dramatically, knowing his next words would seal humanity's fate. Should humans refuse these reasonable demands, the Council must consider more decisive action to preserve galactic stability. The threat hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Other species shifted nervously, recognizing the implications. The Vraxian Empire commanded one of the galaxy's most powerful fleets, with allies that could blockade human space entirely. Economic sanctions alone would cripple Earth's growing interstellar trade. Speaker Thymon's crystalline form pulsed with soft light as he addressed the human delegation. Ambassador Chen, the Council recognizes your right to respond to these charges. How does humanity answer? Sarah Chen stood slowly, her movement lacking the theatrical flourishes common to galactic diplomacy. She was smaller than most beings in the chamber, unremarkable except for the absolute stillness in her posture. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly without amplification. The Terran Federation rejects these demands in their entirety. The simple statement sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several species began chattering in alarm while others sat in stunned silence. This was not how galactic politics worked. Smaller species always negotiated, always found compromise when faced with overwhelming opposition. Chen continued without acknowledging the reaction. The systems in question were unclaimed when human colonists arrived. Our archaeological surveys found no evidence of prior habitation or territorial markers. We established colonies according to standard council protocols and registered them through proper channels. Zektar's gill slits flared with indignation. The protocols you reference are merely formalities. The Vraxian Empire has held influence over those regions. For influence is not ownership, Chen interrupted, her tone remaining level. If the Vraxian Empire wished to claim those systems, they should have done so through official channels rather than relying on assumptions of authority. The chamber erupted in heated discussions. Several species had similar informal arrangements based on traditional spheres of influence. The human interpretation of council law was technically correct, but it ignored thousands of years of diplomatic precedent. Speaker Thaimon raised one crystalline appendage, calling for order. Ambassador Chen, while your interpretation of territorial law has merit, the Council must consider broader implications for galactic stability. Surely some compromise can be reached that respects both human expansion and established relationships. Chen's expression didn't change. Speaker Thaimon, with respect, humanity has attempted compromise for 20 years. We have repeatedly offered joint development agreements, shared research partnerships, and favorable trade terms. Every offer has been rejected in favor of demands that we abandon systems we legally claimed and developed. She turned to face Zektar directly. The Vraxian Empire has made their position clear. They want us gone from systems we have every right to occupy. They want reparations for resources we legally extracted. They want us to acknowledge their authority over territory they never bothered to claim formally. The human ambassador paused, and something in her stillness made the entire chamber fall silent. The Terran Federation's position is equally clear. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not pay reparations for legal activities. And we will not acknowledge Vraxian authority over unclaimed territory. Zektar's voice carried a dangerous edge. Then, you force us to consider alternatives to diplomacy. For the first time, something that might have been a smile touched Shen's lips. Ambassador Zektar, that choice has always been yours to make. But, I would strongly advise careful consideration of the consequences. The implied threat sent new waves of shock through the assembly. A species with barely 50 years of space travel was challenging one of the galaxy's major powers. It was political suicide, or complete insanity. Are you suggesting, Zektar said slowly, that humanity would choose warfare over reasonable compromise? Chen's smile widened slightly. I'm suggesting that humanity has never lost a war, Ambassador. We don't plan to start now. The silence that followed was deafening. Several council members frantically accessed their databases, checking human military records. What they found was disturbing. Humanity had indeed never lost a major conflict, though their war seemed unusually brutal by galactic standards. Speaker Thaimon attempted to restore diplomatic calm. Surely, Ambassador Chen, you recognize the futility of conflict against such overwhelming odds. The Vraxian Empire alone possesses forces that outnumber your entire fleet by significant margins. Speaker Thaimon, Chen replied, your concern is appreciated but unnecessary. Humanity has faced overwhelming odds before. We have a saying, the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. She gathered her simple briefcase and nodded to her advisors. The Terran Federation's position is final. We claim no territory that isn't rightfully ours, but we will not surrender what we have lawfully gained. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Chen addressed the chamber one final time. To those who would threaten human colonies and human lives, know this, we do not negotiate with terrorists. We do not compromise with bullies. And we do not show mercy to those who mistake our peaceful intentions for weakness. The three humans walked calmly toward the chamber's exit, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. As they reached the doors, Chen paused and looked back. One more thing, honored council members. When species threaten humanity, we don't seek to defeat them. We don't aim to contain them. We eliminate them completely. Every ship, every station, every world that supports aggression against human citizens becomes a legitimate target. She paused to let the words sink in. I would strongly recommend that the Vraxian Empire reconsider their position before learning why humanity has never needed to surrender. The doors closed behind the human delegation with a soft chime that somehow sounded like a funeral bell. For long moments, the greatest deliberative body in galactic history sat in absolute silence, processing what they had just witnessed. Zektar's gill slits fluttered rapidly as he tried to process the human's response. In his centuries of diplomatic experience, he had never encountered such absolute refusal to negotiate. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, found ways to compromise that saved face while acknowledging reality. But humans seemed to operate by different rules entirely. Speaker Limon finally broke the silence. The council will recess to consider this development. Representatives are advised to consult with their governments regarding the unprecedented situation we now face. As the chamber began to empty, many species clustered in small groups, their conversations urgent and worried. The galaxy had just witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible, a minor species choosing annihilation over subjugation. Zektar remained in his seat long after most others had departed, staring at the empty human section. His intelligence sources had provided extensive data on human military capabilities, economic resources, and technological development. By every rational measure, humanity should have accepted compromise rather than face destruction. But the humans had spoken with such absolute certainty, such complete confidence in their position, that doubt began creeping into his certainty. What did they know that the rest of the galaxy didn't? His personal communicator chimed softly, displaying an urgent message from Vraxian High Command. Intelligence networks throughout Council space were reporting unusual activity around human territories. Ships moving with purpose, communications traffic increasing exponentially, and, most disturbing of all, human civilian populations beginning to evacuate from frontier colonies. The evacuation reports made no sense if humanity was preparing to surrender. But they made perfect sense if humanity was preparing for total war. Zektar's hands trembled slightly as he read the final line of the intelligence report. Human colonies weren't just evacuating civilians, they were evacuating everything except military personnel and defensive installations. It was the behavior of a species that expected their territory to become a battlefield. Or the behavior of a species that planned to make someone else's territory into a battlefield. As he finally rose to leave the chamber, Zektar couldn't shake the memory of Ambassador Chen's final words. Humans didn't seek to defeat their enemies or contain them. They eliminated them completely. For the first time in his long diplomatic career, the Vraxian ambassador wondered if his empire had made a terrible mistake. But pride and political necessity made retreat impossible now. The challenge had been issued publicly, before the entire galactic community. Whatever came next would echo through the stars for generations. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had never needed to surrender, and why some species should never be pushed too far. The Terran Federation had rejected compromise not out of arrogance, but out of absolute certainty in their ability to win any conflict they chose to fight. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy would survive the lesson humanity was about to teach. Admiral Thane Marcus stood before the holographic display in the Terran Federation's Strategic Command Center, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of stellar charts. The facility, buried 3 kilometers beneath Luna's surface, had been designed to survive anything short of planetary annihilation. Today, it would serve as the nerve center for humanity's response to galactic aggression. Status report, Colonel Hayes, Marcus said without turning from the display. Colonel Sarah Hayes, his intelligence chief, stepped forward with her datapad. Sir, Vraxian forces are mobilizing across 17 systems. Initial estimates suggest they're preparing a blockade of our outer colonies, with possible invasion forces being assembled at their Kepler station shipyards. Marcus nodded slowly. Timeline? Intelligence suggests they'll be ready to move within 72 hours, sir. Their allies are contributing ships, but most species seem to be holding back to see how this develops. The Admiral finally turned to face his staff, his gray eyes scanning the faces of the men and women who would help execute humanity's response. Each of them had been briefed on Operation Sunfall, the contingency plan that had been developed in absolute secrecy over the past decade. Gentlemen, ladies, Marcus said quietly, Ambassador Chen has given them fair warning. The Vraxian Empire has chosen to interpret our peaceful expansion as a threat to their authority. They believe superior numbers will force us to capitulate. He gestured to the star chart behind him. They're about to learn why human military doctrine doesn't recognize the concept of acceptable losses when our citizens are threatened. Commander Elena Rodriguez, the youngest officer in the room, raised her hand slightly. Sir, the intelligence reports suggest Vraxian forces outnumber our fleet by approximately 8 to 1. Their technology is roughly equivalent to ours, but their production capacity. Commander, Marcus interrupted gently, what did you learn in your military history courses about numerical superiority? Rodriguez straightened. Sir, historical analysis shows that numerical advantage means nothing if the enemy can't bring their forces to bear effectively. Correct. And, what happens when a military force designed for territorial conquest faces one designed for complete annihilation of threats? The young commander's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Sir, they're preparing for the wrong kind of war. Marcus smiled grimly. Precisely. Colonel Hayes, initiate Phase 1 of Sunfall. I want all deep space reconnaissance assets positioned and ready. Commander Rodriguez, signal all fleet commanders to begin deployment. Silent running protocols are now in effect. As his staff dispersed to carry out their orders, Marcus returned his attention to the star charts. Red indicators showed Vraxian military positions, while blue markers represented human assets. The numbers looked overwhelming until you understood what those human assets actually were. The galaxy had made a fundamental error in assessing human military capabilities. They had counted ships and evaluated weapon systems, but they had failed to understand the philosophy behind human warfare. Other species fought for territory, resources, or political advantage. Humans fought for survival, and, when survival was threatened, they held nothing back. 3 hours later, Admiral Marcus received confirmation that Phase 1 was complete. Across human space, seemingly routine cargo shipments had revealed their true purpose. What the galaxy had assumed were commercial vessels had been carrying military supplies, personnel, and, most importantly, weapons that officially didn't exist. The Terran Federation had spent 50 years in space, but they had spent the last 20 of those years preparing for exactly this moment. While diplomats spoke of peaceful expansion and trade agreements, military engineers had been developing technologies that pushed the boundaries of Council regulations. Sir, Commander Rodriguez reported from her station, all Ghost Fleet assets are in position. Wraith Squadron confirms ready status. Marcus nodded. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's deepest secret, a collection of ships that existed only in classified files, manned by personnel who officially didn't exist. For 2 decades, these phantom vessels had mapped every major military installation in Council space, identified critical infrastructure, and prepared for a kind of warfare the galaxy had never seen. Admiral, Colonel Hayes called out, long-range sensors are detecting the first Vraxian task force entering human territory. 3 dreadnoughts and supporting vessels heading for our mining colony at Kepler 7. Estimated arrival time? 18 hours, sir. Marcus walked to his command chair and activated the fleet-wide communication system. Across human space, every military commander would hear his words simultaneously. This is Admiral Marcus to all Terran Federation forces. As of this moment, the Federation is at war with the Vraxian Empire and any species that support aggression against human citizens. Our response will be swift, decisive, and absolute. He paused, knowing that intelligence services throughout the galaxy would be recording every word. To those who believe humanity will negotiate from weakness, understand this: we have never fought a defensive war. When threatened, we do not retreat, regroup, or seek terms. We advance until the threat is eliminated. The communication channels remained open as Marcus continued. Operation Sunfall is now active. All commanders are authorized to engage enemy forces with extreme prejudice. No quarter will be given to military targets. No mercy will be shown to those who threaten human civilians. Across the galaxy, intelligence analysts scrambled to understand what Operation Sunfall meant. The name appeared in no human databases they had accessed, and its implications were terrifying in their mystery. Marcus closed the general channel and opened a secure line to Captain Diana Storm, commander of the TFS Retribution, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. Captain Storm, you are authorized to demonstrate why the Terran Federation has never needed to surrender. Show them what happens when a species mistakes our restraint for weakness. Understood, Admiral. Retribution is moving to intercept the Vraxian task force. We'll provide them with an education in human warfare. The Retribution had been designed as a proof of concept. What could humanity achieve if they abandoned Council restrictions on weapon development? The ship's fusion drives were twice as efficient as anything in Council space. Its armor incorporated materials that shouldn't have been possible to manufacture. And its weapons. Captain Storm's weapons could crack planets if necessary. As the Retribution departed its hidden base in the asteroid fields beyond Pluto, sensors throughout the system detected gravitational anomalies that shouldn't have existed. The ship's drive signature was unlike anything in galactic databases, suggesting technology far beyond what humanity should have possessed. Meanwhile, in the Vraxian system of Korath, Admiral Vexkai received confirmation that human colonies had completed civilian evacuation. His intelligence staff was struggling to understand why humans would abandon valuable infrastructure unless they expected it to be destroyed. Admiral, his communications officer reported, were receiving a transmission from the human colony at Kepler 7. It appears to be a formal surrender. Vexkai's gill slits fluttered with satisfaction. Perhaps the humans were more reasonable than their diplomatic posturing suggested. Put it through. The image that appeared on the main screen showed a human military officer standing in what appeared to be an empty command center. The man's uniform bore no rank insignia, and his expression was completely neutral. "This is Colonel Thomas Grant, commanding officer of Kepler's 7 Defensive Garrison. I am transmitting the formal position of the Terran Federation regarding Vraxian forces entering this system." Vexkai leaned forward, expecting to hear terms for surrender. Instead, Grant's next words sent chills through the Vraxian command staff. "You have entered human territory with hostile intent. Your ships constitute a direct threat to Federation citizens and installations. Under the laws of war established by the Terran Federation, your vessels are now classified as legitimate military targets." Grant paused, and his neutral expression shifted to something that might have been a predatory smile. "You have exactly 10 minutes to reverse course and leave this system. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your task force. This is not a negotiation. This is not a warning. This is a statement of fact." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Vexkai staring at a blank screen. In his centuries of military service, he had never received such an ultimatum from a force that was clearly outgunned and outnumbered. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, "sensors are detecting unusual energy readings from the colony's asteroid mining platforms. The signatures don't match known human technology." Vexkai studied the sensor data with growing unease. The mining platforms were radiating power levels that seemed impossible for their size. Moreover, they were moving, something that mining platforms definitely shouldn't be able to do. "Sir," another officer reported, "we're detecting a single human vessel approaching our position. Frigate class, minimal escort. Should we target for destruction?" "Not yet," Vexkai replied, though his certainty was beginning to waver. Something about this entire situation felt wrong. Human behavior wasn't following any predictable pattern. As the 10-minute deadline approached, the Vraxian task force maintained course toward the human colony. Vexkai had no intention of being intimidated by a species barely capable of interstellar travel. At exactly 10 minutes, the universe changed. What the Vraxians had assumed were mining platforms revealed their true nature as the largest mobile weapons platforms ever constructed. Each asteroid was actually a hollowed-out rock filled with fusion reactors, particle accelerators, and enough firepower to sterilize worlds. The single human frigate approaching their position suddenly accelerated to speeds that violated known physics, its hull shifting and expanding as hidden weapon systems deployed. In seconds, the small escort vessel transformed into a dreadnought-class warship that dwarfed anything in the Vraxian fleet. Captain Storm's voice echoed across all frequencies as the Retribution dropped its disguise completely. "Vraxian vessels, you have ignored our warning. Your destruction will serve as an example to others who threaten human citizens." The battle that followed lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ended, the Vraxian task force had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. No escape pods. No survivors. No witnesses except the long-range sensors that recorded everything. Throughout Council space, military leaders watched the sensor recordings in stunned silence. The humans had just demonstrated technology that shouldn't exist, tactics that had never been seen, and a level of ruthless efficiency that terrified veterans of 100 conflicts. But the destruction of the Vraxian task force was only the beginning. As news of the battle spread, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human cargo ships were revealing themselves as warships. Research stations were deploying massive weapon arrays. And human colonies were launching military operations that struck deep into enemy territory. The species that had demanded humanity's surrender were about to learn the difference between fighting for conquest and fighting for extermination. The Terran Federation had prepared for this moment for 20 years, and they were about to show the galaxy why some predators should never be awakened. Admiral Marcus watched the sensor feeds with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 had proceeded exactly as planned. Now it was time for Phase 2, and the real demonstration of human warfare was about to begin. The Vraxian Empire had wanted a war. Humanity would give them exactly that, just not the kind of war they expected. Emperor Vrexthon of the Vraxian Empire stood before the massive tactical display in his war room, watching red indicators disappear one by one across the galaxy. Each vanishing symbol represented a military installation, supply depot, or fleet element that had simply ceased to exist in the past 72 hours. The humans weren't fighting a war, they were conducting an extermination. Your Majesty, General Kexfor said hesitantly, we've lost contact with 17 forward bases, the entire Third Fleet, and 4 of our major shipyard complexes. The humans are not engaging in traditional warfare patterns. Vrexthon's clawed hands gripped the edge of the command table until the metal groaned under the pressure. In 8 centuries of rule, he had never faced an enemy that simply appeared without warning, destroyed everything in their path, and vanished before any response could be organized. How many human ships have we confirmed destroyed? The Emperor asked. General Kexfor's gill slits fluttered nervously. None, Your Majesty. Our forces have engaged human vessels in 14 separate encounters, but, in each case, the enemy ships either withdrew before taking significant damage or they revealed capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates. The latest reports were the most disturbing. Human vessels that appeared to be damaged would suddenly shed their outer hulls like molting insects, revealing completely intact warships underneath. Some human ships seemed capable of fragmenting into multiple smaller vessels, then reassembling at will. And their weapons. Sir, a communication officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the council chamber. Speaker Thymon is requesting immediate consultation with all involved parties. Vrexthon straightened his ceremonial armor and nodded grimly. Perhaps the council could mediate before this situation escalated further. The galactic community surely wouldn't allow a primitive species to threaten established powers without consequence. Minutes later, the Emperor's holographic image appeared in the council chamber alongside representatives from 47 species that had supported the ultimatum against humanity. Many of the assembled leaders looked shaken, their usual diplomatic composure replaced by barely concealed fear. Speaker Thymon's crystalline form pulsed with agitated light patterns. Honored leaders, we face an unprecedented crisis. Human forces have conducted simultaneous attacks across 17 systems, demonstrating military capabilities that our intelligence services failed to detect. Ambassador Chen's image materialized in the human section, as calm and composed as ever. She wore the same simple blue uniform, but something in her expression suggested that negotiations were no longer possible. Ambassador Chen, Speaker Thymon continued, the Council urgently requests clarification regarding recent human military actions. The destruction of civilian infrastructure and the targeting of non-combatant vessels appears to violate established laws of warfare. Chen's response was delivered in the same level tone she had used during the original confrontation. Speaker Thymon, with respect, the Terran Federation has targeted only military assets belonging to species that declared hostile intent against human citizens. Our intelligence networks are quite thorough. Emperor Vrexthon activated his communication array. Lies. Human forces destroyed our civilian shipyard at Karath Prime. That facility produced commercial vessels, not military ships. Your Majesty, Chen replied without emotion, Karath Prime was producing modified cargo vessels with concealed weapon systems for use against human colonies. Our intelligence classified it as a legitimate military target. The Emperor's voice rose in outrage. Impossible. That information is classified at the highest levels of. He stopped abruptly, realizing what he had just admitted. Chen continued as if nothing had happened. Additionally, the facility was manufacturing targeting systems specifically designed to overcome human defensive technologies. The workers were given 72 hours to evacuate before the installation was eliminated. Around the chamber, other species leaders began to shift uncomfortably. If humans possessed intelligence capabilities that could penetrate the most secure Vraxian installations, what other secrets might they have discovered? Furthermore, Chen added, the Terran Federation wishes to clarify its position regarding this conflict. We are not at war with the Vraxian Empire. We are eliminating a threat to human security. The distinction sent chills through the assembled leaders. Wars had rules, limitations, opportunities for negotiation and surrender. Elimination operations had only one possible outcome. Speaker Thymon attempted to restore diplomatic process. Surely, Ambassador, there must be terms under which hostilities could cease. The Council stands ready to mediate, Speaker Thymon, Chin interrupted. The time for mediation ended when Vraxian forces entered human space with hostile intent. The Terran Federation's response will continue until the threat to our citizens has been completely removed. General Kexbor's image appeared beside the Emperor. Ambassador Chen, the Vraxian Empire is prepared to withdraw from all disputed territories in exchange for an immediate ceasefire. General, Chen replied, your offer is noted but insufficient. The threat assessment regarding Vraxian military capabilities remains unchanged. Emperor Vrexthon's composure finally cracked. What more do you want? We're offering complete withdrawal. Chen's expression shifted slightly, and, for the first time, something that might have been sympathy crossed her features. Your Majesty, the Terran Federation's position has been clear from the beginning. When species threaten human citizens, we don't seek to defeat them. We eliminate them completely. The silence that followed was broken by desperate voices from other species representatives. Ambassador Chen called out the Zelkan delegate. Surely you don't mean to imply genocide against an entire species? Not genocide, Chen corrected. Threat elimination. The Vraxian Empire as a military and political entity will cease to exist. Individual Vraxians who pose no threat to human security will be relocated to reservation worlds under Federation supervision. The casual way she described the complete destruction of a galactic power sent shockwaves through the chamber. This wasn't military conquest, it was the administrative dismantling of an entire civilization. This is madness. Emperor Vrexthon roared. The entire galactic community will unite against you. No species will tolerate such aggression. Chen turned her attention to the broader council chamber. Any species that chooses to support Vraxian aggression against human citizens will be classified as hostile and dealt with accordingly. The Terran Federation strongly advises neutrality in this matter. She paused to let the implications settle before continuing. To date, 47 species have provided material support for Vraxian military operations. Intelligence suggests that 23 of those species are reconsidering their position. We encourage the remaining 24 to do likewise. Around the chamber, delegates frantically activated their communication devices, desperately trying to contact their home governments. The humans possessed intelligence capabilities that made their most secure communications meaningless, and their military technology exceeded all previous estimates. Additionally, Chen continued, the Terran Federation wishes to address recent concerns regarding our expansion into previously unclaimed systems. All human colonies established in the past 20 years were placed in systems that showed no signs of current habitation or formal territorial claims. She activated a holographic display that showed detailed archaeological surveys, sensor readings, and legal documentation. However, our surveys did reveal evidence of ancient civilizations in 37 of these systems. Civilizations that were systematically destroyed by Vraxian expansion forces approximately 3,000 years ago. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several species had suspected that the Vraxian Empire's territory included worlds with mysterious archaeological ruins, but none had imagined the implications. The Terran Federation has determined that the Vraxian Empire's current territory includes the homeworlds of at least 15 extinct species. Species that were eliminated not through warfare, but through systematic extermination campaigns designed to remove all trace of their existence. Emperor Vrexthon's gill slits fluttered in panic. Those records were supposed to have been destroyed millennia ago. Ancient history has no bearing on current territorial disputes. Your Majesty, Chen replied, the descendants of those extinct species might disagree. Fortunately for the Vraxian people, the Terran Federation believes in justice rather than revenge. Vraxian citizens will be allowed to live under human supervision. The casual dismissal of an empire that had dominated the galaxy for millennia was perhaps more terrifying than any direct threat. Chen spoke of the Vraxian Empire's destruction as if it were an administrative task to be completed efficiently. The process will begin immediately, Chen announced. Vraxian military forces have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. Civilian populations should remain on their homeworlds and await Federation representatives. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. She looked directly at Emperor Vrexthon. Your Majesty, the Terran Federation offers you the opportunity to facilitate this transition peacefully. Cooperate with our terms, and your people will be treated with dignity. Continue to resist, and we will be forced to implement more direct methods. This is impossible. Vrexthon raged. No single species can challenge the entire galactic order. The Council will never allow, Your Majesty, Shin interrupted. The Terran Federation is not challenging the galactic order. We are correcting it. The galaxy has operated under the assumption that strength comes from age and numerical superiority. You are about to learn that strength comes from the will to do whatever is necessary to protect your people. She turned back to address the full council. Any species that wishes to continue normal relations with humanity need only refrain from threatening human citizens. Trade will continue. Cultural exchange will be welcomed. But military aggression against the Terran Federation will result in swift and permanent consequences. The transmission from Ambassador Chen ended abruptly, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Around the galaxy, military leaders watched their tactical displays in growing horror as more Vraxian installations simply vanished without warning. Emperor Vrexthon stared at the empty human section of the chamber, finally, understanding the magnitude of his miscalculation. His empire had challenged a species that didn't fight for territory or resources. Humans fought for survival, and they had prepared for this moment with the methodical patience of apex predators. The Vraxian Empire, which had dominated the galaxy for 3,000 years, had approximately 68 hours left to exist. And, across council space, 46 other species were desperately trying to contact their governments to withdraw support for what had become not a war, but an execution. 3 months after the 72-hour ultimatum expired, Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of the newly constructed Galactic Coordination Center on Luna. The facility had replaced the old council chamber system, implementing what humans called administrative efficiency in galactic governance. The Vraxian Empire had ceased to exist exactly on schedule. Chen paused before a massive window overlooking the construction sites where former Vraxian warships were being converted into agricultural vessels and medical transports. The transformation had proceeded without resistance once Emperor Vrexthon had witnessed the complete destruction of his military's command structure in a single coordinated strike that lasted 14 minutes. Ambassador, came a voice behind her, the morning briefing is ready for your review. Chen turned to see Dr. Martinez, her chief of staff, approaching with his usual collection of data tablets. The transition to human oversight of galactic affairs had required enormous administrative effort, but the results spoke for themselves. Status report on the Vraxian resettlement? Chen asked. Proceeding ahead of schedule, Martinez replied. The former emperor has been remarkably cooperative in organizing civilian populations. Agricultural colonies on their new homeworlds are already producing surplus food, and their technical expertise is being redirected toward infrastructure development. Chen nodded approvingly. The Terran Federation's approach to former enemies was proving more effective than traditional conquest methods. Rather than ruling through fear, humans had implemented systems that made resistance pointless while providing clear benefits for cooperation. What about the other species that supported the ultimatum? 46 governments have formally apologized and requested normalized relations. The Zelkan Federation has even proposed a mutual defense treaty. Most interesting is the Carillion Empire. They're offering to share their advanced medical technology in exchange for human protection from potential aggressors. The transformation of galactic politics had been swift and comprehensive. Within weeks of the Vraxian Empire's collapse, other species had begun competing for human favor rather than challenging human expansion. The revelation of humanity's true military capabilities had rewritten every strategic calculation in known space. Chen walked toward the central command center, passing through corridors lined with representatives from hundreds of species. Unlike the old council chamber with its elaborate displays of cultural superiority, the new facility emphasized function over ceremony. Species were represented based on their contribution to galactic security and prosperity rather than their age or territorial holdings. The central briefing room contained a three-dimensional holographic display of the galaxy, but the strategic situation bore no resemblance to the political maps of 3 months ago. Red zones marked areas requiring active human intervention, mostly former Vraxian territories being transitioned to new administrative systems. Green zones indicated stable regions under Terran Federation protection. and blue zones showed human colonies and development projects. The amount of green and blue had increased dramatically. Ambassador Chen called Captain Rodriguez, now serving as Director of Galactic Security. We have the weekly summary of territorial applications. Chen reviewed the data with interest. 17 more species had requested Terran Federation protection in the past week alone. The applications weren't motivated by fear of human aggression, but by recognition of the benefits that came with human oversight. Human-protected systems experienced dramatically reduced piracy, improved trade efficiency, and accelerated technological development. More importantly, they gained security guarantees that no aggressive species would dare challenge. Any concerns from the applications? Chen asked. The Meridian Collective is requesting intervention against the Trackari raiders who've been attacking their merchant ships. Standard response parameters apply. Will offer protection in exchange for integration into the Federation's trade and security network. Chen approved the request with a simple nod. The Trackari raiders would learn the same lesson as the Vraxian Empire. Threatening human-protected citizens resulted in swift and permanent consequences. The briefing continued with reports from across the galaxy. Former trouble spots had become peaceful trade routes under human patrols. Technological advancement had accelerated as species gained access to previously classified human innovations. And, perhaps most significantly, the number of active conflicts in Council space had dropped to historic lows. "Ma'am," interrupted a communication officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the former Vraxian homeworld. Emperor Vrexthon requests to speak with you personally." Chen raised an eyebrow. The former emperor had been remarkably cooperative since his government's collapse, helping organize civilian populations and providing intelligence about potential security threats. His request for direct communication was unusual but not concerning. "Put him through to conference room 3. I'll take it privately." Minutes later, Chen faced the holographic image of the former emperor. Vrexthon looked older than his centuries would suggest, but his demeanor showed none of the desperate rage from their last communication. Instead, he appeared almost grateful. "Ambassador Chen," he began formally, "I wanted to speak with you about the future of my people." "Your Excellency," Chen replied, using the courtesy title humans had established for former leaders who cooperated with Federation policies, "your people are adapting remarkably well to their new circumstances. Agricultural output on Vraxia Secondary has exceeded all projections." Vrexthon nodded slowly. "Yes, and that's what I wanted to discuss. My people are happier than they were under the Empire. They have meaningful work, adequate resources, and no fear of military conscription or territorial conflicts." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I spent 8 centuries ruling through strength and expansion, believing that conquest was the only path to security. But my people were always afraid of losing what we had gained, afraid of stronger enemies, afraid of internal rebellion." Chen waited silently, recognizing the significance of what the former emperor was sharing. "Under your administration," Vrexthon continued, "they have something I could never provide: certainty. They know that their basic needs will be met, that their children will receive education and healthcare, and that no external threat can harm them. They don't need to conquer others to feel secure because the Terran Federation provides absolute security." The admission was remarkable, coming from a leader who had commanded one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. "Your Excellency, the Federation's goal has always been to provide stability and prosperity for all species under our protection." "Yes," Vrexthon said, "and that's what I wanted to formally acknowledge. The Vraxian people would like to request permanent integration into the Terran Federation, not as subjects or refugees, but as full citizens. We want to contribute to the system that has given us what centuries of empire could not." Chen considered the request carefully. The Vraxian integration had proceeded smoothly, but full citizenship represented a significant step beyond administrative oversight. "Your Excellency, full Federation citizenship requires acceptance of human military service obligations and loyalty to Federation principles above species loyalty. Are your people prepared for that level of integration?" "Ambassador, my people have seen what the old system produced: endless conflicts, constant fear, and the eventual destruction of everything we built. They've also seen what the Federation provides: security, prosperity, and the chance to contribute to something larger than themselves." Vrexthon straightened to his full height. "I formally request that the Vraxian people be granted the opportunity to earn Federation citizenship through service and contribution. We want to be part of the solution, not just beneficiaries of it. The conversation concluded with Chen promising to present the request to the Federation Council for consideration. As the transmission ended, she reflected on how completely the galactic situation had transformed. 3 months ago, the Vraxian Empire had threatened human colonies with destruction. Now, former Vraxian citizens were requesting the privilege of serving in human military forces and contributing to Federation objectives. The pattern was repeating across the galaxy. Species that had initially feared human expansion were discovering that human protection offered benefits that traditional independence could not match. Trade flourished under Federation security guarantees. Scientific advancement accelerated through collaborative human research programs. And, perhaps most importantly, the constant threat of military conflict that had plagued the galaxy for millennia was becoming a memory. Chen returned to the main command center to find Captain Rodriguez reviewing deployment schedules for the expanded Federation fleet. Captain, how many species have requested protection agreements this quarter? 87, Ambassador. At this rate, human protected space will encompass 60% of inhabited systems within 2 years. Chen studied the strategic display with satisfaction. The red zones marking areas of concern were shrinking rapidly, replaced by the green of stable Federation protectorates. But, more significant was the growth of blue zones, systems where species had chosen full integration rather than simple protection agreements. Any resistance movements or aggressive actions against Federation interests? Nothing significant. The Carillion pirates attempted to raid a Federation convoy last week, but they surrendered immediately when our patrol ships arrived. Word has spread that resistance to Federation forces results in permanent solutions. The galaxy had learned the lesson that the Vraxian Empire had taught through its destruction. Humans didn't negotiate with aggressors. They didn't seek to contain threats. They eliminated problems completely and efficiently. But they also rewarded cooperation and contribution beyond what any previous galactic power had offered. Species under Federation protection enjoyed security and prosperity that independent existence could never provide. Ambassador, Martinez called out, "We're receiving a transmission from Speaker Limon. He's requesting formal dissolution of the old Galactic Council and transition to full Federation administrative authority." Chen smiled. The crystalline being who had once presided over the chaotic deliberations of hundreds of competing species now recognized that effective governance required unified leadership rather than endless debates. Schedule the transition ceremony for next week. It's time to make the changes official. As the briefing continued, Chen reflected on humanity's unexpected role as galactic administrators. 50 years ago, humans had been an unknown species struggling to achieve faster-than-light travel. Today, they provided security and governance for most of known space. The transformation hadn't been planned, but it had been inevitable once other species chose to test human resolve. The galaxy had operated under the assumption that newer species would defer to older, more established powers. They had learned that age and tradition meant nothing when confronted with absolute determination to protect human citizens. The Terran Federation had grown from a small collection of colonies to the dominant galactic power not through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that challenging humanity resulted in swift and permanent consequences. Species that cooperated found themselves with security and prosperity beyond their wildest dreams. Species that threatened human interests simply ceased to exist as organized entities. And, now, 3 months after the Vraxian ultimatum had initiated the transformation, the galaxy was more peaceful and prosperous than it had been in recorded history. Chen looked out at the construction sites where former warships were being converted to peaceful purposes, at the representatives of hundreds of species working together toward common goals, and at the tactical displays showing a galaxy finally free from the constant threat of military conflict. The Galactic Council had been stunned when humans rejected talks and opted for total annihilation of threats. But they were even more surprised to discover that humanity's approach to galactic governance was not domination through fear, but administration through competence. The lesson had been learned, and the galaxy was better for it. The Terran Federation had proven that sometimes the most effective path to peace was the absolute certainty that aggression would result in annihilation. And, now, with that certainty established, true cooperation could finally begin.